Good morning, City Collective. Thanks for joining us for Church Online. My name is Pastor Jason, and this is my beautiful wife, Adriana, and we're so glad you're with us.
We are so glad you're with us.
Yeah, we love Sundays, and we love to spend it with you and spend it together. It is September 20th.
I had to think about that for a second.
I did.
I'm surprised that you don't know that it's September 20th, because it's a pretty big...
It's a fair statement. It's a fair statement.
Yeah.
You know what? Today is actually our 2-year anniversary as a church. It's pretty awesome. We're really excited about it, but it is a little anticlimactic. It's kind of like you're about to have your birthday and your mom wants to throw you a birthday party, and you've got all these friends that want to come, but they can't come on that day in particular. So she plans the party the next week. That's kind of what we're experiencing right now at City Collective.
Is this like a personal memory? Is that why it's like, coming up?
I'm like sharing trauma. But we are going to celebrate. It's a wonderful thing, 2 years as a church community.
Yeah.
Some of you have come recently. Some of you have been there since the beginning. We're really just grateful for the community that we share. And we're going to take the opportunity to celebrate next Sunday. We'll give you more details about that at the end of the service. But we do have a question to get our morning rolling.
We do. My question to you is, what are some back to school traditions that you've had?
Well, based on your question, it sounds like you had multiple. So I'm really intrigued to hear what yours are.
No, mine is just like mainly one. And I think it's, if I know mom correctly, it's probably the same one.
Please tell me what your tradition was. I'm very intrigued now.
New clothes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Don't tell me that mom didn't take you shopping for new clothes.
Yes, mom dragged me
you. Yeah.
to the mall.
I can also attest for this because it is semi a dragging still.
Yeah. I'm not a big shopper. But I don't mind getting new things. The thing that I would always look forward to every year, and this remains a consistent element of my shopping experience, I would love to get me some new kicks. You want to have some fresh white kicks when you're going to school. First day, show up, you and the boys, showing off. Look at what I got, the new Kobe's. I was too old for LeBron's, but it was the new Kobe's at the time that were like all the rage, and so they were important. Maybe you have some Jordans that you toss on there, and maybe we don't really grow up as boys. We still love our kids.
I mean, it wasn't really an experience like that for me. I can't say I got together with the boys and showed off my sweet kicks.
Yeah.
But we did go shopping, and it was. I'm also a quality time person, so it was also like dedicated time with me and my mom.
Yeah, that's so sweet. Yeah, and I think mom would have also liked that on my side as well. That quality time was valuable. I was going to say something really snarky like the tradition every year is we pull out the report card from the year before and notice what do I need to get better on. But mom and dad never did that. They're wonderful. I just think it's funny.
I think you and Jessica would have done that.
Probably. We might have done that to ourselves.
And Jessica would have been like, I beat that.
Up your game. Yeah. Up your game. Yeah. Lots of wonderful back to school traditions. We know that there are some families in the church that are going to school for the first time, and that is exciting. We hope that you've had a peaceful week in the midst of a lot of craziness. Go ahead.
I'm just really excited because we also have a little first time announcement.
Oh, we do have a first time announcement.
Yeah, I don't know why you're pretending like you just remembered, because we've been talking about it for a whole while. I don't know. I feel like I'm too excited. Maybe you should say it.
So lots of new beginnings. People going back to school.
Yeah.
Before we jump to this one, I just want to say, toss in the comments, what are some of your back to school traditions that you just remember fondly? Maybe with a little bit of angst, whatever sparks inside of you. Tell us in the comments below.
New friends were always my angst.
Oh, that's fair.
Meeting new people.
Fair. That was the opposite. That was my favorite part. Show me all the people. But yeah, comment below and let us know. The other new beginning that we're just really, really, really excited to celebrate is a new baby in the City Collective family.
Maddie Ray, Madison Ray. What a great name.
So what a great name. Sam and Jer, we are so pumped for you and for your family.
Yeah,
you're probably seeing some photos up on the screen right now showing off this amazing, beautiful, some of our favorite people.
Little baby girl.
We just cannot wait to meet the little baby girl. Hopefully soon here, and know that we're praying for you, know that we're believing that this season's going to be full of so much joy, and we just are so excited for you. So City Collective, give them some congratulations, give them some love. We got a new baby in the house.
I'm so excited.
It's really great.
I love new babes.
It's really, really wonderful. But we'll let you know a couple of the announcements at the end of service about things we have coming up that we're really looking forward to. But at this point, we're going to have a time of worship, time of the word. We're continuing our series, Ravens and Roses, and this idea of loss. It's going to be a great morning together, and one that I hope challenges you and leads you forward into a great week ahead. Let's prepare our hearts and
let's worship together.
Worship our King. Come, let us bow at His feet. He has done great things. See what our Savior has done. See how His love overcomes. He has done great things. He has done great things. Done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high. Oh God, you have done great things. You've been faithful through every storm. Be faithful forevermore. God, you do great things. And I know you will do it again. 'Cause your promise is yes and amen. God, you do great things. Yes, you do great things. And break every chain, oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high, oh God, you have done great things. You have done great things. Oh God, you do great things. before I spoke a word. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You've been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You've been so, so kind to me. You're the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. When I was your foe, when I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You've been so, so good to me. Well, I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You've been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up,
Thanks for joining us in our time of worship, and thank you to our team for continuing to lead us in spaces of singing and worship at City Collective, both online and at each of our hubs. It has been a gift. If this is your first time joining us online or at one of our hubs, thanks for being with us. This is a safe space to consider the questions of life, which we all need to ask. And wherever you find yourself on your journey of faith, know that you're welcome here. Now, this morning, we are continuing with our series called Ravens and Roses, looking at loss, at grief, and when life doesn't go according to plan. But this week, we're digging into the more immediate idea of loss that might come to your mind when you hear the word. The truest definition of loss defines it as having something or someone leave or be taken away from you, a feeling of grief when they are gone. That's often the idea that comes when we hear the word loss. Faith is great, but loss is real. Resurrection is the power of God found in Jesus, but death is part of our broken world. And where we find ourselves as a society sees people viewing death as merely a statistic, and others caring very little about the statistic and more about the loved one that they have lost. This is a big and immediate idea that we are constantly dealing with, but has been brought even more so to the forefront. Now, I don't think I grieve particularly well. In reality, I'm a highly optimistic person. The glass is always half full. The sun will rise tomorrow. You know all the mantras that are out there. Pick them, you might need them. I unashamedly embrace and adhere to a lot of them on most days. Now, I know that for some of you, you might find this incredibly annoying. And what I have to say to you is that I forgive you. It's okay. I'm going to hold on to them because I like being a little bit optimistic. But in all seriousness, dealing with loss, and in particular the loss of a friend or family member, is likely deserving of more than an optimistic thought and quick processing. And despite my poor marks in the area of grief, I can remember where I was and what I was doing upon receiving word of deaths to friends and of family. The shock, the gut-wrenching feeling of pain, the long list of questions that roll through my mind: how, why, where, and even like the instant fight or flight response kicking in, of which I have found myself going in either direction. Loss of life always is and always will be and should be difficult. To become numb to the loss of life is to stop seeing the God-given value in every single person. And even as I was preparing this talk this morning, I found myself challenged to reflect upon my own ability to grieve. Because part of the reason for the series Ravens and Roses is to take the wrapper off of our cultural tendency to avoid. We need to be more honest about the tougher parts of life. And the beautiful truth of the Bible is that it actually tends to rub our noses in those harder parts. Because the Bible is a whole lot more honest about life than we often tend to be. So this morning, we're talking about looking at death, grief, and lament in the life of a character named Naomi. So let's read together from Ruth chapter 1.
Hey guys, I am reading from Ruth chapter 1, verses 1 to 18 in the NIV. Verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back to you with your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." At this, they wept aloud again. Then Oprah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her.
Thank you to Kirsten and to our hub facilitators for leading us in that reading this morning. Now I want you to jump into the story with me. Can you imagine that moment shared between Naomi and Ruth? All they had gone through, the conversations that they would have already had, the pain that they would have experienced individually and as a family. And though the name of the book is Ruth, I think for our conversation this morning, we can learn a lot by looking at Naomi. Ruth would be named not only in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, and be part of the lineage of Jesus. She was known for much, but the line at the end of verse 4 is likely how Naomi saw herself. Not just for that moment, but for most of her life. Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. She had experienced deep and painful loss, and in the midst of her grief, we see some powerful moments. But this one in particular, between herself and Ruth, intrigues me. About to leave for her homeland with 2 Moabite women, lost her husband and sons, unsure of what life would look like moving forward, and basically telling her daughters-in-law to leave for a better life. Though there is a noble nature to her appeal to them, if you have ever experienced the loss of a loved one, you know that there is more going on than she would seem to let on. If she was completely honest with herself in that moment, I think that even Naomi would admit that she was being driven by more than a desire for them to be good. I know that when I have experienced loss, there is always a hint of fear that sneaks in. C.S. Lewis would write a book in 1961 called A Grief Observed, under the pseudonym N.W. Clerk, a collection of reflections on his experience following the death of his wife Joy in 1960. It's this powerfully honest account which begins with the necessary honesty, and he writes, "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. I am not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness, the yawning. I keep on swallowing. At other times, it feels like being mildly drunk or concussed. There's a sort of invisible blanket between the world and me. I find it hard to take in what anyone says, or perhaps hard to want to take it in. It's so uninteresting. Yet I want others to be about me." This is a powerful statement from him. When we encounter loss, it sets in a fog of emotions which can feel so like fear, paralyzing to the point of avoidance or no response. So So my question for you this morning is, how honest are you with yourself? I know for myself that I can often convince myself, if there's a plate of good food in front of me, that I can keep on eating. I can push myself, I can enjoy it, and it's going to be so good. It just tastes so good. I'm going to have some more of that and more of that. And you know what? I should have had that third plate. I shouldn't have enjoyed that last piece of chicken. It was going to hurt me a little later, and we can lie to ourselves in those funny moments and in those serious moments. I think that we are often brutally honest with ourselves about what we do and actually highly evasive about what we're actually truly feeling. And when it comes to the loss of life, it always is and always will be and should be difficult. But dealing with loss carries more than meets the eye. And consistent struggle that we can often face is grief. In grief is even accepting invitations to grieve. In John 16:22, Jesus is encouraging his disciples to grieve when they experience loss. And he says, "Now is your time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy." Be in your grief. Don't pretend that it's not there, but understand that you need to be aware of what's going on. Don't pretend that it isn't there, but grieve and have hope for joy to come. Honesty in grief is needed in the consideration of hope. And these two things don't seem particularly amicable, but Lewis, he would write this later on in that same book. He would say that a grief denied is a grief unhealed. And it is in that grief that we will discover that God grieves too. Now, the language of grief might not sound particularly optimistic or carrying those expected elements of hope, but in truth, honesty is vital for a grieving person to acknowledge the reality of what has been lost head on. Call it what it is. This helps stave off denial and is a big step on the journey through grief, because hope is more than a good feeling, and sometimes simply starting to take one step down that path of healing is that feeling of hope that we need. This idea of honesty in grieving has a different term tied to it in the biblical perspective, which we're probably more familiar with in action than in word, and it's this idea of lament. In fact, there's a whole book given towards it called Lamentations, and like I said earlier, the Bible is a whole lot more honest about life than we tend to be. We can think ourselves through many a situation, ending at this kind of conclusion that life is good for the most part, until some intruder, some interloper called grief or loss or death comes crashing in, and then there is no telling where our hearts and our minds travel. Has everything come undone? How can I know the meaning of such things? Does life even have a meaning? These are what those emotions kind of do to us. They lead us down this spiral. And the book of Lamentations, it wrestles with such questions. It doesn't pull any punches. It doesn't really consider any realm of human questioning out of bound. And some people are kind of surprised by this. Some assume that faith is thinking happy thoughts, or adopting a positive attitude, having confidence that things will turn out well. But how could this book of poems then be included in our scriptures? Why is it there? Well, it's there because faith, don't get me wrong, is confidence, but it's not false or untested confidence. Faith is willing to expose itself to the full questions of life, and that's why we need to lament. Lament is defined as a passionate expression of grief or sorrow, to fully communicate to ourselves, to others, and to God. Lament is important to our mental health because it names what is wrong and it makes it visible for remedy. When we isolate or refuse to speak about what hurts us, it can be very, very hard to heal. Hear me this morning. If there has been a loss in your life recently or years ago, and you have not taken a moment to be honest, today is the perfect day to let honesty enter the room where you have thrown away the key so you never had to deal with the grief inside. Passionately express your grief and sorrow to God. Honestly share your grief, knowing that it is a step forward. I know it's something that I don't often do. I'm more the type to quietly self-process and deal with it on my own terms and not really talk about it too much, if I'm being honest, to keep myself busy. It doesn't sound too appealing to deal with it. In early 2019, a close friend and my grandfather in Calgary, they both died really suddenly in a span of about a month. I remember I was going back and forth almost every weekend, it felt, for that month, even trying to preach on the Sunday after a funeral back in Calgary. And let me just say that I learned really quickly that though my physical strength was there, my emotional and mental capacity bottomed out pretty hard on that Monday morning. Grief takes a toll. Grief is a process, and grief is a reality that we face in those moments of loss which are inevitable. And no one wants to face it. No one is ever really prepared to see someone gone. And when we experience it once, it's a feeling that we never really want again. And one of the things we do is what Naomi attempts in this situation with her two daughter-in-laws. She says, "Leave me alone. This is for your own benefit. I'm helping you. I'm a miserable mess. Don't waste your time on me. I'm just going to continue on with life, but just leave me. Everyone else already has." Fear prescribes isolation as the remedy to our grief. And it so often wears a cloak of nobility as a smokescreen. I'm going to do the noble self-sacrificing thing and get people away from me. Naomi shouldn't have been left alone to her grieving path forward, and you shouldn't either. The way that grief makes us feel alone is not the actual fix to a broken heart. We are not equipped to do this alone. This is why passionate expressions of grief are so important to our mental health. It's why lament is simply not a self-indulgent moment of complaining, because when we enter into it, it can properly and consciously name what is wrong, and it invites others to walk alongside us, and that is part of how we heal. We all need a Ruth in our stories who refuse to leave us in our pain. And sometimes that person will see you and recognize you and recognize your hurt and step in. But there are times when we are the ones who are given the power and opportunity to invite someone to process with us, to walk with us, to talk with us, and to be a safe place to lament and heal. Because note this, that Ruth didn't say that she would stay with Naomi if she stopped grieving. She said that she would stay to grieve with her. And sometimes the most powerful comfort we can give those grieving around us is a quiet presence to listen and grieve alongside, to mourn with those who mourn, to weep with those who weep, to share in the struggle. Sometimes the greatest comfort you can give someone in their grief isn't a solution, but just yourself. We so often, we want to be carriers of hope, and we're called to be carriers of hope, but we just sometimes get the job description wrong. It's as if someone has told you your entire life that if you're going to be a teacher, your only responsibility will be to write on a chalkboard, and then you become a teacher and all you do is you write on a chalkboard. You refuse to even look at an iPad or any form of technology. You don't pay attention to anyone else in the room. You're just writing on that chalkboard. You're just doing your responsibility. And kids, they don't get to ask questions. You're just doing what you are supposed to do. And it's as if we have been trained by culture that our responsibility as hopeful people is to provide solutions in moments of grief. And we take more time to speak than listen. We want to move on quickly, and we get frustrated when our perfectly crafted solution doesn't work. And we have not listened to the way of Jesus that invites us to mourn with those who mourn. Not solve those who mourn, not fix those who mourn, but mourn with those who mourn. And just like Ruth came near to Naomi, we know that God comes near to us in our pain. And we need to imitate this posture towards those we see who are suffering. Naomi, she had lost her husband and 2 sons. Grieving was her perpetual state. And yet this moment of beauty was Ruth truly being who Jesus calls us to be. To be a Christ carrier of hope, we must realize that hope is a gift meant for healing, but it can become a tool we use to avoid pain. And we aren't doing anyone a favor by rushing through grief to get to a good feeling. We need to find a balance between hope and being present in tough feelings of loss, and even just understand that hope isn't the power to reduce pain. It's the power to be present in pain. Because grief takes time. Because healing, it takes time. Nora McClerney, she says this, that we don't move on from grief, we move forward with it. What if grief is a kind of activism? What if one of the most subversive acts right now is to give voice to our grief, to refuse to quote unquote move on? Such grief, it denies denial its power to look away in a desperate pursuit of healing. Just as there is no peace without justice, there is no healing without grief. So what do we do with our losses? We must mourn our losses. We cannot talk or act them away, but we can shed tears over them and allow ourselves to grieve deeply. To grieve is to allow our losses to tear apart feelings of security and safety and lead us to the painful truth of our brokenness. Our grief makes us experience the abyss of our own life in which nothing is settled, clear, or obvious, but everything is constantly shifting and changing. But in the midst of all this pain, there is a strange, shocking, yet very surprising voice. It's the voice of the one who says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." That's the unexpected news. That there is a blessing hidden in our grief. Not those who comfort are blessed, but those who mourn. Somehow in the midst of our tears, a gift is hidden. Somehow in the midst of our mourning, the first steps of healing take place. Somehow the cries that well up from our losses bandage our broken hearts. So know this, that every time you're hurt and you're grieving the loss of someone, so much more so does the heart of God. The person you're thinking about this morning is loved so deeply by God. And sometimes we just need to be reminded of that. Just 6 weeks ago, we received a call from my parents that my aunt in India, Auntie Shobha, had died very suddenly. It was a series of events that should have never happened. It felt preventable. It was escalated by pandemic restrictions in the region, and it cost us my beautiful aunt. She loved Jesus. She served her family with an uncommon ferocity and care. She was kind and generous, and she's no longer with us. And with complete transparency, there is no good answer. I hate it. Death. It's painful, it's confusing, it's infuriating, and yet we find ourselves moving forward. Just because I'm a pastor doesn't mean I don't ask the same questions that we all feel in these moments. And there may not be the perfect answer to satisfy our desire, but the Bible does ask a lot of right questions. knowing with confidence that our faith is better for it. And in our questioning, we find hope in the God who loves every single person, including my Auntie Shoba, unconditionally. Knowing that death was not God's design for the world, but life is, renewal is, and resurrection is. And in our grief, we need to remind each other, to help each other remember that grief is this multitasking emotion. We get to be more than one thing at a time, that you can and you will be sad and happy. You'll be grieving and able to love in the same year, or week, or the same breath. And we need to remember that a grieving person is going to laugh again and smile again. Remember what we talked about today, that shock is normal. Don't pretend. Feel what you feel. Be honest with yourself. Describe what you've lost to others and to God. Lament is an invitation. And be comfortable with your tears, because we have a God who meets us in our loss, weeping with us while healing our hearts and lives in ways we could have never imagined. Nicholas Woolstorff, he lost a son in a climbing accident, and he said this, that it's through our tears that we see the tears of God. That when we grieve, we join God in lamenting beauty that has been broken. And we grieve in anticipation of the day when all will be restored. And then finally, consider how grief can be a kind of activism in a powerful pursuit of healing. You might be grieving this morning. This has been a difficult season for so many. Or perhaps this is something that has happened years ago that you just haven't talked about, haven't processed through, haven't asked someone about. We're talking about this idea of loss because it matters. That it impacts our lives physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And we are invited by God to grieve, to mourn, and to find God in the midst of it all, inviting us forward, not to move on, but to move forward with that grief, to help us discover all over again that we are loved by a God who is with us in the midst of our struggle. City Collective, if you are feeling anything from the sermon this morning that is really sticking with you, we're going to make sure that we are inviting you to be praying, to be leaning in with us. We believe that there is an opportunity for us to stand together, that we need each other, we need to be honest, and we need community. And we need to be reminded of the hope that we find in a Savior that came to us in the midst of our struggle, in the midst of our brokenness, in the midst of our grief, and brought us salvation and peace in a way that never seemed possible. I invite you to pray with me this morning. Father, we just give you thanks that our loss is something that we can bring to you, that our pain is something that we can bring to you, and that we can discover your peace in a way that passes all understanding and draws us closer to your heart. So for those who are mourning or grieving this morning a loss of a loved one, recently, from years past, wherever it is that we find ourselves this morning, I pray that your blessing of comfort would come to those who are mourning. That you would give us the courage to speak honestly, the courage to grieve and to bring others into our struggle, to bring you into our struggle. Thank you for giving us the hope of tomorrow, that peace is possible, that joy is possible, and we can find it directly in you. We give you thanks. In your name we pray. Amen.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. He's worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, we live for you. Holy, holy, there is no one like you. There is none besides you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Jesus, Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. He is worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, we live for you. Holy, holy, there is no one like you. There is none besides you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I'll build, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none besides you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I'll build, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone,
Thanks, City Collective, for leaning in this morning. I know it was a heavy topic that we've all experienced at some point in our lives, and I hope that it can be a point of encouragement, a point of reflection for you this week. And if there was a piece of the sermon or an element of it that really just struck you and sat with you, I would invite you to reach out to our prayer team, pray@citycollective.com. Don't sit in it alone. Know that we are in it together, and we have the opportunity to experience God's incredible grace in the midst of our grief. But yeah, there's a couple things that we want to leave you with this morning, announcements of great things coming in the weeks ahead. And first off, we have
Birthday
party
celebrations. We have 2 evening services next weekend, September 27th, 5 o'clock, 6:15, Jericho Ridge.
Come on.
You can find all that information online, and you'll need to go online to register because we only have 50 spots. Not from us, but the government. So we wanted to make sure we had 2 services, so as many people as we could have can come. So make sure you register, and that will see you there. The best part about any birthday, though, is the food.
The food is primary.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we have 2 food trucks coming. So they're coming at 5:45, and they'll be there until after the second service. So if you want to come a little bit before the second service and get a little food, or stay after the first service, whatever you want, they will be there. We're really excited to just hang out, see everyone, and celebrate the church.
And a little bit of a teaser of what to expect.
Oh, yeah.
Some burgers and chai. Maybe
Yeah.
not the combination you were expecting, but it's the combination you wanted.
It's a combination I want.
Yeah, it's going to be a great evening together. The week after that, on October 4th, we're having our next Hub Sunday, and registration for that will be opening this Thursday. They've been great opportunities for us to stay connected as a church and to be able to gather and have these discussions. If you haven't been able to make it out to one, I would highly encourage that you do so. There's multiple happening across the Lower Mainland on October 4th.
October 4th.
And then one of our priorities at the church is
Giving.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to partner with us financially, we've been doing some really cool stuff in the community and for all of you. So we would love for you to partner with us.
Yeah.
If you call this home, you can do so by going to citycollective.com/give.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, if you are needing prayer or anything that is just going on in life that feels a little overwhelming and you just want someone to stand with you, make sure you email our prayer team, pray@citycollective.com. I know that they would love to talk with you, to stand with you. It's just a great way, another way for us to stay connected.
Yeah.
And that about wraps up our time together this morning. I hope it's been a blessing to you. I know it's been a blessing to us. And I'm just going to close us in a benediction. If you feel comfortable, would you just extend your hands with me? May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May you discover hope, love, and faith in the midst of so much loss, knowing that God is at the center, leading us forward and healing us all along. Love God.
Love people.
Be the church. Have an amazing week. We will see you next Sunday. Happy birthday, City Collective.